Hey everybody, welcome to today's lecture. Sorry it's taken so long to get this up, but other things have had to take precedence right now as I try to get things situated for this class and then next week's class. So today we're going to be looking at the shift of power in the world. Um, when it comes to Asia and basically the forefront of the Western world. We're going to be looking at the fall of China and uh, the dominance that Europe is going to play in that area of the world. And then we're going to be looking at the rise of the United States as a world power and how it begins to sort of push back against European supremacy throughout the world. And then we're going to be looking at the rise of Japan as an imperial power, sort of a very rapid rise from a isolationist power into this imperial force that is one to be reckoned with. So that'll be the three different sections that I put up today. Number one would be China, then the United States, and then Japan. So without any more ado, let's get going. So first, we're going to be looking at the conquest of China, how the European powers are able to take down China and basically carve it up into their own sort of area for trade and exploitation. When you look at China in the 1800s, you had the Qing dynasty in decline, in sharp decline, um, as far as culturally and socially. Economically, it's still doing pretty well, but it is beginning to stagnate, beginning uh, to fall into a monotonous pattern, just as much as it is culturally. So economically, tradition is dragging down industry. At the beginning of the 1800s, the people of Britain really wanted to trade fairly with China and come in and use China as sort of another buffer with with which to protect India as well. And so the Chinese um, basically balked at this, and they began to, they basically said that they're going to do things their own way, and doing things their own way also included industrial production. Industrial production is almost entirely based on traditional methods, so they don't really have a lot of industrialization. Any other help from the British would have helped them bring in industrialization. They restricted trade with the West, and there's only some areas where you could trade, that being the Canton system. And this basically says that Canton is the only port where European ships can come in and trade. So this means that there's a huge backlog in trade opportunities for countries if there's only one port. So we have a traditional production method where everything is based on those traditional methods that are all about artisanal work, about um, skill and everything being very well done, which is great when you're selling high class goods. But when the rest of the world is creating things quickly and mass manufacturing goods to be sold throughout the world, this is a going to slow down your economy. And just think about where we're talking about here, where China is refusing to mass manufacture things. Instead, they're taking their sweet time and creating valuable goods. But those valuable goods are very much sought after in Europe, and so it is helping them for a while. But you'll start seeing that the this pressure begins to mount. I mean, trade is good for China, as they uh, as it allows them to make a lot of money. They don't industrialize. They don't need anything from the West, and the West is instead going to send a lot of silver to them. The West is, is going to sending in so much silver from the Americas that you are starting to see China being looked at as a spot that is, growing increasingly wealthy, but they are squandering that by not developing things. And so, there is a severe distortion of the economy as more and more money is going to merchants, more and more money is going to the upper class, the poor who would be working in industrial factories, that their descendants probably are working in industrial factories, aren't being cared for, and so there's a lot of unemployment. There's a lot of people that that are losing money. As more silver comes in, you start seeing a lot of inflation, and so the economic impact of trade is good up to a point where they don't have anything. They just have too much wealth, and they have too much of a wealth gap, and they have no ability uh, to spend this money until the West finds something that China clearly wants, and that is opium. And so opium becomes the downfall of the Qing dynasty, as you see the the base. I mean, this is an opioid crisis that goes through China. We've seen the kind of damage that an opioid crisis can do here in the United States in the last few years, and it happens in China. During the 1800s as well. Opium, also known as Lacrima papaveris, or the tears of the poppy, as the fluid there coming from the poppy seeds can be uh, synthesized and used to create opium. And in modern days, it's chemically um, cultivated and turned into heroin, or opiates can be made into opioids or painkiller drugs, which we've seen here in the United States, and um, as a very addictive compound, and a very um, a drug that you need to continue to take more and more and more of in order to achieve the same level of high. And so opium comes into uh, comes into the mainland of China through sailors that are also going through in Persia, especially the British. The British we talked about this last time, where the British and the Russians sort of have these spheres of influence in Persia, and the British. Um, are going to find that the Persians use opium in for recreational purposes, and it's a very highly addictive compound. And the opium comes to China in British ships. The Chinese citizens begin to buy them and buy opium, and the Chinese citizens are instantly hooked on this product, and opium continues to come to China along these British ships, and the British are continuing to just bring it in. They begin to bribe um, officials on other port cities to let them bring in opium, and they begin to start making a lot of money selling opium to Chinese citizens. The Qing court tries to block the import. They appointed Lin Zheju, who imposed penalties on smokers, arrested dealers, and seized supplies. Basically, they tried a zero tolerance policy um, on the sale, a sale and distribution of opium, and they blockaded the foreign factory area in Canton. But by that point, heroin had become heroin, opium had become such uh, a common use um, drug. They were, literal, they were opium dens, and there it was very easy for people to get a hold of, and very easy for to get addicted of. And as you can see in these pictures here, what happens is basically you just sleep. It is a painkiller relaxer, and so you would have people basically in beds smoking opium all day, and sleeping, waking up, smoking more, and sleeping, basically wasting away until they ultimately died. And a lot of these opium dens would basically have bunk beds where people would just, they were communal bunk beds where people would just sleep and smoke for days on end up until their death. And so this, the Qing court tries to intervene, tells the British to stop. At one point sends them a strongly worded letter that doesn't work, and so the Chinese are forced to attack British ships, which is a declaration of war in the British eyes. And so the first of the Opium Wars begins in 1839, and the superiority of the British firepower um, allows the Western powers to easily win. By 1842, you have the Treaty of Nanking, where the Chinese agreed to the terms, and the opium trade continues unabated. The British give up, are able to take the port city of Hong Kong, and in 1842 they say, well, the British decide to have the city of Hong Kong until like 1996. I believe that's what it was. It was 96 or 99. I can't remember off the top of my head. But they said, they basically give that number and say, this is when you can have Hong Kong back. It's basically, we'll all be dead, so who cares when this goes back? And that has had a huge, impact on the world, especially the people living in Hong Kong. Um, uh, at the end of it was 1996. At the end of 1996, beginning of 1997, when people that have been living in Hong Kong as a British protectorate since the 1840s, the people have been living there generations since the 1840s up till 1997. And then all of a sudden, they are given back to, at this point, communist China. And now you have riots, you have protests. You have um, a lot of a lot of bad blood between the people of Hong Kong and the people of China proper. And so the opium wars, even here into the 21st century, are still bearing bad um, fruit, if you will. So uh, the first Opium War leads to Hong Kong being given to the British, leads to um, favorable trade status given to the British and to other Western forces, and then basically the Chinese try to get them to stop. Uh, Breaking these treaties, and the British refuse, and so there's a second Opium War in 1856 that lasts a few more years, but ultimately, once again, the Chinese are defeated, and the Chinese are basically forced to completely open up to the Western world in around 1860, and from 1860 to 1898, you're going to see the uh, continued decline of the Qing dynasty and the rise of anti-Western sentiment. You're going to see the West begin to sort of dominate China and um, uh, basically ignore the wishes of China, and that's going to lead eventually to this Boxer Rebellion. Now, this Boxer Rebellion is known as the Boxer movement because of the rough translation from Chinese. The direct translation of the Boxers is the righteous and harmonious fists. So they felt that they were striking back, fists raised against the West, and so the that translated roughly as the righteous, the Boxers. So the Boxer Rebellion. Uh, Plays into this anti-West sentiment amongst the people. They despise the fact that the government has capitulated to the West, and so they begin to attack foreigners. Um, the Boxers begin to um, do as the guerrilla movements that we've talked about throughout this entire semester do, and that is strike against high level targets, slink back into the shadows, and then sort of blend in with the people. There's very little identifying who is a boxer and who is just an ordinary person until the conservatives in the court begin to openly side with the rebels. Here you have Empress Dowager Shishi, and Shishi was the de facto ruler of China for about close to 50 years, as we have talked about before. The emperor had become a had become very um, as he got older, had become very much more held in sway by the conservative forces of the court. As he began to retreat, other conservatives like Empress Dowager Shishi uh, um, began to take more power, and eventually she was basically the de facto leader, sort of the puppet master behind the strings, as as Emperor Tongji ends up dying, and she basically just becomes in complete control. Um, I believe at the point of his death, her son, his heir, was only like 5 years old. So she comes in and becomes the regent, and then basically just pushes the rightful emperor out of the way. And so she begins to side, especially with the Boxers, and so the Boxers begin to feel more motivated and begin to feel uh, more feel a lot braver and a lot more open to the um, position of attacking foreigners out in the open, not even caring about who sees them. And so the Europeans strike back, and then against the Boxers get more brazen, and then the Qing come out in support of the Boxers and begin to fight back against Europeans. And so with this attack against Europeans by not just the Boxers but now also the Qing proper, you have a coalition created by the here's a picture of what the Boxers began to look like as they became a lot more open and a lot more brazen um, in their public pursuits of vengeance against the Europeans. I wouldn't want to run into any of these guys in a dark alley or a well lit alley. Even they seem like they mean business, and I would leave. I would leave quickly. But this, as I said, they begin to join forces with the Qing military forces, and pretty soon you're going to need to have a an 8 nation army, not just a 7 nation, but an 8 nation army that intervenes. And this 8 nation army is pictured here very prominently. Let's see if I can remember off the top of my head. I think you have. Let's see, Australian, British, Scottish, Indian, um, uh, um, I believe that is Prussian, Prussian, Austrian, American, Italian, and Japanese. So this 8 nation army is the uh, coalition that comes in to put down the Boxer rebellion, and to um, basically take down the Qing dynasty once and for all. The 8 nation army comes in with 50,000 troops, and they take the capital, and the Qing dynasty is irreparably weakened at this point. The Qing dynasty survives in basically in name only. They are puppets um, to the Europeans, and here you're going to see daily life in Qing in post Boxer Rebellion, Qing China change very quickly. Here's a picture, real quick, of basically normal everyday soldiers sitting on the imperial throne. They come into um, uh, the Forbidden City, and are able to just walk around everywhere. This at one point would be just a place where the emperor sat, but by the end of the Boxer Rebellion, the Europeans are so brazen that they just sort of take pictures sitting down on the imperial throne as sort of a tourist souvenir, and this just sort of shows you how irreparably weakened the Qing are. But as I said, the Qing begin to transition. With the decline of the Qing, you have the change in daily life as Confucian norms begin to decline. um, uh, the Confucian institutions are put to the side, and instead more European modes of society are moved in, such as schools. You see a lot more Western education. Um, Instead of being pushed towards a path based on your exams, based on the way that based on the way that you score in the exams, and basically being pushed that way, sort of a career placement, and then that's basically where you're going. Everyone instead uh, is going to receive the same type of education and be able to have a lot more flexibility in their in the sort of careers that they begin um, to take. You also have the rise of Western religion and culture, and you start seeing Christianity really take hold in China. Basically, at some point, you have very little. A new generation with little knowledge or respect for the past. You also have the rise of a new standing army. This new army is less uh, um, less beholden to the old Chinese military model, and instead is very westernized, a lot more self discipline, and less beholden to the societal structure of Chinese life. You also have the decline of the Manchu as a people, as they begin to sort of be forced to uh, mix, and they're forced to give up that duopoly that they had, and so everyone sort of becomes a lot more equal, and a lot of the wealthier, a lot of the more a lot of the Manchu, they're able to flee to the west to get away from this ever changing China. That's why a lot of the people that you see in the West, in the United States, and in Europe, are Manchu people, and they're the ones that really move in and build the railroads in the United States, and in Europe. They're the ones that are going to begin to set up the Chinatowns, and also in the United States. They're the ones that set up the Chinatowns, and make up the first of that wave of excuse me, the first of that wave of European, excuse me, of Asian immigrants into Europe, and into the United States. Um, you also have a lot of changing roles for women, as women were very uh, are going to have a few more educational opportunities. The roles of women are in transition. Christian missionaries allow um, Christian missions, and becoming missionaries allow for educational opportunities for women that they otherwise wouldn't have in traditional Chinese culture, especially traditional Qing culture. You also have, oops, excuse me, you also have the role of women in factories, and the role of women being able to work um, in factories, and in other areas as well. A lot of women are going to also move into the Americas as well. But this basically leads to a collapse of the old order, and this is going to become much more important as you have things like the rise of Sun Yat Sen. Sun Yat Sen is going to be the father of um, uh, uh, modern China, as he begins to talk about the three people's principles, that being nationalism, democracy, and the livelihood of the people. And I guess next time we meet, we'll talk more about the three principles of the people. I'll go ahead and talk about that before we really move on. But basically, the three people's principles are nationalism, democracy, and the rights of the rights of the people, the livelihood of the people. And that's a really rough translation. Basically, nationalism is more like populism, or like a unified people. Democracy, more like governance rights, or the people's power, or government of the people, instead of the old ways of having more of a democratic um, uh, system. And then the welfare of the people, the livelihood of the people, sort of um, a criticism of capitalism, more of a unified. I don't want to say socialism, since it was not really as European as that. It still had a lot of uh, Chinese uh, civil and social history that goes behind it, of communal, but not communist, communal economic ideas. Like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about these, because that's going to go much more into the Chinese revolutions. But those three principles of livelihood of the people, democracy, and nationalism is going to seep into the hearts of the people. And eventually, you're going to have the revolution of 1911, which begins with the Wuchan Revolution in 1911, as Sun Yat's followers launch an uprising, and then the new army be uh, are going to join in with this revolution, and you're going to see the end of the Qing dynasty here. The last emperor, Emperor Ping, seen there on the right there, is going to be is basically going to disappear from history. This is less a revolution than a collapse of the old order, as the like I said, the Qing had been declining since the early 1800s, so like a century of decline here at the very least. Instead, you're going to see the Wu Chang Revolution is going to lead to a new government that will then be in flux again. But here in 1911, you have the end of the Qing dynasty and the end of dynastic China in total. So from, like, 10,000 BC all the way here to 1911 CE, you have Chinese history completely, without any gaps, without any silences, the rise and fall of dynasties, and it all comes to a screeching halt in 1911. And next time we come and look at China, we'll see what comes after the end of the dynasties.